The BBC was once the leader in broadcasting before TikTok trends, Instagram Reels, and Twitter arguments. The BBC was the big media source that everyone tuned into. Now, it seems that they've nearly disappeared. More than 500,000 homes stopped paying their license fees in 2023, and 2024 is not looking good either.
You can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet, and yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
that's a false.
No, what I
You just lied.
This is the story of how the BBC went from being great during World War II to facing a slow decline filled with scandals, losing both its charm and its viewers. Let's go back to 1922. The world was getting better after World War I, and the BBC started with a goal to inform, educate, and entertain. At that time, this wasn't just fancy talk. The BBC really meant it. Their founder, John Wright, thought that the media should help make society better, and the organization followed that idea. Then came World War II, and the BBC wasn't just a broadcaster, it turned into a crucial support. With Nazi propaganda everywhere, the BBC was like that one friend who always tells the truth. The wartime broadcasts were more than just news. They served as a tool to fight against false information. Churchill liked them, soldiers listened closely, and the public had faith in them like no one else. After the war, the BBC continued to move forward. They changed radio, took over TV, and brought us worldwide favorites like Doctor Who and Top Gear. For many years, they seemed untouchable. No drama, no favoritism, just pure cultural dominance. But nothing lasts forever. This is the point where the BBC began to lose its audience. Their role was to remain neutral, sharing news without showing favoritism, and for some time they did great. But at some point, they stopped being unbiased and began promoting certain stories.
This is the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. A report by the Campaign for Common Sense has revealed that the BBC is allowing a left-wing, politically correct bias to infuse the storylines of drama series.
Look at Brexit, for instance. No matter if you support leaving or staying, it was obvious that the BBC's coverage wasn't fair. Critics criticized them for boosting liberal voices while portraying Leave supporters as outdated or lacking knowledge. That bias wasn't just bothersome, it felt like a letdown for viewers who trusted the BBC to be honest for years.
After reviewing more than a year's output of BBC drama, the organisation suggested that the Beeb was indulging in its own form of social engineering by over-representing minorities and lecturing viewers on topics including climate change.
It wasn't only Brexit. On many controversial topics like immigration, climate change, and social fairness, the BBC has faced claims of favoring progressive views while overlooking the opinions of a large part of the public. Rather than standing for the country, they appeared to be giving it a lecture.
The BBC needs to understand that not everyone signs up to a worldview where the bad guys are the police, Brexit, and Conservative.
The result? People checked out. Fast. The BBC is not only dealing with how people see it, it's also up against the whole internet. Sites like X, YouTube, and TikTok have really changed things up.
I think when it comes to news, people are far more aware of it now.
Everyone has a microphone now, so they don't have to rely on the BBC to know what's happening. The well-known interview between Elon Musk and a BBC reporter turned into a key moment in the ongoing struggle between old media and new tech leaders. The conversation started off focusing on false information on Twitter, now known as X, but it soon grew into a bigger topic, a look at how media is held responsible and its importance in today's online world.
You know, who's to say that something is misinformation? Who's the arbiter of that? Is it the BBC?
You're literally asking me?
Yes.
Well, no, you are the arbiter on Twitter.
The BBC reporter asked Musk about a supposed rise in hateful content on Twitter since he took over. Musk, on the other hand, flipped the situation with a straightforward yet strong reply. He requested clear examples.
Yeah, so the point I'm trying to make is the BBC itself has, at times, published things that are false. Do you agree that that has occurred?
I'm quite sure the BBC have said things before that turn out to not be true.
The journalist, even with his statements, had a hard time showing any clear proof of hateful tweets or troubling pattern. Musk's steady and determined questioning broke down the story being told, leaving the journalist unable to back up his claims.
And I'm asking for specific examples. And you just said that if something is slightly sexist, that's hateful content. Does that mean that it should be banned?
Well, you've asked me whether my feed, whether it's got less or more. I'd say it's got slightly more.
That's why I'm asking for examples.
What started as a way to make Musk answerable instead showed the journalist wasn't ready and made the BBC look weaker.
Particularly around hate speech in the company. Is that
What
something
hate
that you
speech
want
are
to
you talking
address?
about? I mean, you use Twitter.
Right.
Do you see a rise in hate speech?
I mean,
But just a personal anecdote, like what do you? I don't.
This conversation clicked with people everywhere and spread rapidly online. Musk's focus on proof connected with viewers, particularly those who are skeptical of how traditional media reports news. The exchange also showed a bigger change in how people take in and believe information. In a time when sites like YouTube, TikTok, and X provide instant news and open conversations, traditional outlets like the BBC might seem slow and disconnected.
Then I say, sir, that you don't know what you're talking about.
really?
Yes, because you can't give me a single example of hateful content, not even one tweet. And yet you claimed that the hateful content was high.
Well,
That's false.
no. What I claimed,
just lied.
What? No.
The moment showed more than just a quick back and forth between Musk and the journalist. It pointed out the challenges traditional media faces in keeping up with a digital-first audience.
So
Look, people will say all sorts of nonsense. I'm literally asking for a
Right.
single example, and you can't name one.
right. And as I already said, I don't use that feed. But let's.
Then how would you know that?
I don't think this is getting anywhere.
You literally said you experienced more hateful content, and then couldn't name a single example.
Right. And as I said,
That's absurd.
I haven't actually looked at that feed.
Then how would you know there's hateful content?
Musk's way of dealing with the situation showed how important it is to be open and to question claims that aren't proven, highlighting why many people now prefer to connect directly with tech platforms instead of going through middlemen. The BBC feels sluggish, old, and not in tune with today's digital world. If the BBC was already unsteady on its stand, its recent issues have pushed it completely off. The organization, once seen as trustworthy, has faced many controversies, each one damaging its reputation a little more.
It's the British media conglomerate that you might know because they've been platforming predators for the past 50 years. Got a list: Jimmy Savile, Chris Denning, Chris Langham, Jonathan King, Rolf Harris, Stuart Hall, and currently Huw Edwards.
The BBC has become a source of negative headlines, with issues ranging from bad behavior by its well-known figures to public criticisms and online harassment. Huw Edwards wasn't only a presenter, he was the face of BBC News, the person you relied on to share important news in a steady, confident way. In 2023, Edwards was in the news when claims of improper behavior came out, causing the BBC to rush to manage the situation.
One of Britain's best-known television journalists is the story himself in a media uproar that has dominated the headlines there for a week now. The BBC's Huw Edwards was taken off the air amid claims that he paid a teenager for sexually explicit photos.
The situation was complicated, with claims about improper messages and relationships. Although the BBC first attempted to minimize it, things quickly turned into a PR nightmare. Social media blew up, with funny pictures, quick opinions, and discussions breaking down what was happening right away. The BBC's damage control efforts, as good as a paper umbrella during a hurricane.
The Rupert Murdoch-owned Sun newspaper reported an unidentified BBC presenter had allegedly paid around $45,000 to a young person, now 20, for sexually explicit images starting from when he was 17.
For viewers, this wasn't just about one host, it was a hit to the BBC's overall reputation. How can a group that talks about honesty and doing things right have so much confusion going on behind the scenes? Let's talk about Logan Paul for a moment. Whether you like him or not, he sure knows how to make something go viral. When the BBC set up an interview with him, you would expect them to confirm all the details. But Logan, being his usual tricky self, chose to send someone who looked like him instead of coming himself.
Matt thinks he's interviewing me, but he's not. He's not interviewing me, he's interviewing not Logan Paul, who is not me, but will be told what to say with a secret earpiece by me, Logan Paul.
The lookalike entered the studio, struck a pose for pictures, and even responded to some questions before anyone noticed they'd been tricked. The entire situation seemed to show how unimportant the BBC is to younger viewers. They didn't even need Logan Paul to be there.
You're one of the most famous people by many metrics in the world.
Oh my God, he actually thinks it's me. What a dumbass.
Is there like a big weight of responsibility, or is it just a ton of fun?
The internet loved it. TikTok, X, and Reddit were filled with clips and memes making fun of the BBC for being tricked so simply. If you can't figure out a YouTuber, how will you handle the changes in today's media? Any talk about BBC scandals has to include Jimmy Savile. This one isn't just juicy, it's really scary. Savile, a well-known figure at the BBC for many years, was revealed after his death to be one of the most active sexual offenders in the history of the UK. The most tricky part? The abuse occurred while the BBC was aware, with many claiming that those in charge ignored it or did not respond to concerns.
The evidence is now overwhelming that one of Britain's most beloved entertainers, the late Sir Jimmy Savile, was also a predatory sex offender.
Even though this problem happened years ago, it still affects the organization.
Sexually abusing scores of young girls and some boys, some in hospitals, some in care homes, some in the very studios that made him a star.
For lots of people, the Savile case shows a big problem. A scary reminder that the BBC, even with its nice look, has its flaws. Then there's the claim that the BBC isn't just biased, it's really pushing an agenda. For a long time, critics have noted how some stories get more attention than others, especially on hot topics like Brexit, immigration, and climate policies.
Effectively, we have to pay for this propaganda. And I think that it's getting to the point now where things are becoming unwatchable.
In the Brexit discussion, for example, many said the BBC was favoring a pro-Remain stance. Farage fans often criticized the network for viewing Leave voters as not well informed, while more liberal commentators claimed it was giving too much attention to out their opinions. In the end, the BBC succeeded in upsetting both sides of the debate, a unique ability but not a positive one. Here's the thing. People aren't just voicing their concerns, they're leaving. Many people are stopping their TV licenses. More than 500,000 homes did it in 2023, and even more might do the same in 2024. This isn't just some unhappy viewers, it's a big uprising. Why is that? Lots of people feel more and more distant from the BBC as it finds it hard to stay important in a fast-changing media world. Many people feel that there is a strong bias making them feel left out instead of included.
The early 2000s, there was a drama series called Spooks, for example, which was so biased in the way that it presented the threat to British society that it was almost laughable.
Also, it's hard to explain why the BBC's license fee is beneficial when services like Netflix, YouTube, and TikTok provide more fun and cheaper options. These new platforms offer content that fits with what young people like today, giving quick satisfaction that the BBC often doesn't provide. Young people, especially, feel a weak connection to the BBC. Since they grew up with smartphones rather than regular TVs, they find it hard to see why they should pay for a service that doesn't match their experiences or likes. What comes next? Can the BBC make a comeback, or is it the start of the end? To be honest, it's tough to tell. They need a big change to keep up, beginning with getting rid of bias, using digital platforms, and really paying attention to what their audience wants. But here's the simple truth. In today's world, trust and being important are everything. If you lose those, it won't matter how famous you used to be. The BBC has been a big part of culture, but if they don't change quickly, they might become unimportant, and no number of Doctor Who reruns can help them. If you like this video, please check out this video about how a family owns London, added in the description.